Real ones know, yeah, we getting money. Real ones know, yeah, we getting money.
Yo, welcome back, Real Ones Know. And we back with another update to the Karmelo Anthony trial. His appeal has been submitted. Mike Howard, his attorney for the case, submitted an affidavit, and some things were revealed. And we feel like this may have been a rigged trial from the jump. Now let's get into it. We have a video from the young lady. The page is I'm Not a Lawyer, But, and it's a very good video. Let's check it out.
Karmelo Anthony's new defense team filed a motion for a new trial, and I'm not a lawyer, but I read all 193 pages. Let me tell you the reasons they say Karmelo deserves a new trial and the evidence they say that backs up each of those reasons. So jumping right in with reason number one, and that has to do with the Sixth Amendment, which gives every person accused of a crime the right to a trial and the right to a public trial. And in this situation, it's the public trial part that Karmelo's attorneys are saying was violated. Specifically, they're arguing that while the courtroom wasn't technically closed to the public, the restrictions the judge put in place made it function as if it were. According to the motion, only about 27 seats were available for members of the general public to sit in on the trial, and people were in line as early as 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning for a chance to get one of those seats. Then if you couldn't get one of those seats, initially the judge had an overflow room set up where you could still watch and listen to what was going on. But according to the defense, once jury selection ended, that overflow room was shut down, which basically meant if you were not inside the courtroom, there was no way to hear or see what was going on. And so Karmelo's attorneys say that's where the constitutional problem begins. Because according to them, before a judge can place restrictions that close a courtroom off to the public, the judge is supposed to follow what's called the Waller test. And the Waller test comes from a U.S. Supreme Court case that lays out 4 things that have to happen before a courtroom can be closed off to the public, particularly when a defendant is objecting. So the first prong of this test is whoever is asking for the closure has to show that there's an overriding interest that would likely be harmed if the courtroom were to stay open. So for example, if there was a need to protect a confidential informant or maybe a minor who's a victim, that would be an overriding interest that could make sense for the courtroom to be closed. And then the second prong is that any closure that is done has to be as limited as possible. So in other words, the judge isn't supposed to restrict more of the trial than is actually necessary. So if the concern is for one witness that is a confidential informant, only that person's testimony should be restricted, not the entire proceeding. And then the next prong says that the judge has to consider reasonable alternatives before limiting public access. So the judge is to consider things like moving to a larger courtroom, maintaining an overflow room, or using some other method that allows the public to observe the trial. And then the fourth prong of this Waller test is that the judge has to explain the decision on the record as to why he is closing the case. So that means the judge is supposed to explain what important interest is being protected and why this closure is necessary. They're also supposed to explain why any other options won't work for this and why the restriction they're choosing is not broader than necessary. Now, it's worth noting that when the judge for Karmelo's case entered the order limiting courtroom access, he actually cited the Waller test himself. In the order, he wrote that unrestricted public access could, quote, compromise courtroom security, juror privacy, and the defendant's right to a fair trial.
I will say this, the reason this is important, because there are some things that are more, front facing or more understandable. But in terms of the law, she's breaking down a lot of the constitutional rights that we have that were violated on Karmelo's behalf. So it's a good thing that she's breaking this down. Also, I want to get into some of the more salacious things, the things that people are saying, hey, this is open and shut, and things that are more understandable, but the constitutional things are also important, very important. Let's continue.
But in the same order, he also promised reasonable public access consistent with constitutional requirements. And so that considered, the defense is arguing that despite the judge's promise that reasonable public access would be given, they say that's not what actually happened. The attorneys are saying the restrictions that were put in place for Karmelo's trial went way too far, and the public was effectively shut out once the testimony began. And because of this, they say Karmelo's Sixth Amendment right to a public trial was violated and he should be granted a new trial. Now, before you get to commenting and saying that doesn't seem like it's enough for him to get a new trial, let me tell you the case law that they are using to support their position. The first case they cite in their motion is Stricker versus Texas, where a woman named Jennifer Stricker was convicted of stealing somewhere between $150,000 to $300,000 from a man named Daniel Perez. Now, after Jennifer's trial, she appealed on the grounds that her right to a public trial was violated because the judge in her case denied letting one of her friends in during jury selection. In her case, the judge repeatedly said that he wasn't closing the courtroom, but because of the lack of space, he was denying the friend entry inside. So Jennifer appeals, and the Texas Court of Appeals said that if the courtroom wasn't really closed, why did the judge feel the need to keep saying that it wasn't closed? And they also ruled that the judge didn't properly apply the Waller test. Specifically, they said the judge didn't consider any reasonable alternatives for Stricker's friend or anyone else who may have wanted to observe the trial to be able to do so. And so in Jennifer's case, the appellate court ruled that her Sixth Amendment right was violated, and they granted her a new trial. And this connects to Karmelo's argument because his attorneys are saying, even though the judge in his case may have not intended to close the courtroom, by restricting how many people could actually get in and then shutting down that overflow room once witnesses began testifying, he essentially did close the courtroom. And they also argue that it's clear he didn't consider any reasonable alternatives because in an interview the judge gave after Karmelo's trial, he admitted that he could have considered using audio.
Do you think it reinforced your decision to not have cameras or streaming inside this?
Sort of. I will tell you this. Sometimes I think maybe I should have at least the audio streamed or something so people could hear it. But at the end of the day, I don't think, no matter what, people are going to report whatever happens or whatever they hear into their own agenda. And so what's the point? And again, that noise affects people. It affects the fairness of the trial, the safety of the witnesses, the safety of the jury. Those are my primary concerns, not what social media says.
See, the thing with the nonchalantness about what's the point is that people want a fair trial. People want to see what's going on because this is a high profile case and it's been politicized. So people want to know. And when you try to do things underhanded, this is why you get the outcome of the backlash and people are enraged. So if you had been facing forward from the jump, we may have never even had this issue.
My duty. I don't think it's my job to feed social media or the media stuff. I certainly understand the role that media plays in a case like this, but I'm not here to feed it. And I take that very, very seriously.
The next case Karmelo's attorneys cite in this motion is Hernandez versus Texas, where the Texas Court of Appeals granted a man named Mauricio Hernandez a new trial after a judge didn't allow 5 of Mauricio's friends and family in the courtroom during jury selection because of a lack of space. For Mauricio's appeal, the appellate court ruled that this judge, again, didn't properly apply the Waller test, and specifically, the judge didn't consider reasonable alternatives for the friends and family to watch the jury selection. Okay, so I'm not a lawyer, which I've already told you, but there are some clear differences between Karmelo's case and these cases, but there also are some clear similarities. So I'm curious, for the lawyers and non-lawyers, based on what I've presented, what do you think about the argument Karmelo's team is making that everyone has the right to a public trial and that based on these other cases, Karmelo's right was violated? And before you comment something that is going to make me block you, I'm not asking you what your personal beliefs are on Karmelo or if you think he should or should not get more time. Okay, that's not the question. I'm asking you if based on the case law they are presenting, if you believe Karmelo's case falls in line with that and his right to a public trial may have been violated. That's what I'm asking you. Okay, moving on to reason number 2 as to why Karmelo's attorneys say he deserves a new trial. And it has to do with why Karmelo didn't testify during his trial. Basically, Karmelo's new attorneys say that before the trial started, the prosecutors and Karmelo's old attorneys made an off-the-record agreement that they would, quote, try the case clean. The two sides agreed that they would only focus on what happened under the tent that day, and neither side would bring up.
Now, that's a problem. Now, if it had been a black person who had been killed, they never try the case clean. They always instantly get to digging in the background of the victim if it's black. School records we saw with Trayvon, with Mike Brown. Tamir was so young, but they would go find the father, the parent of the child, and tell their criminal record and all of these things. So for his attorney to agree to something like that, it seems like it was some collusion there. That's what it looks like on the outside, because we've seen these types of cases and it's never clean when the victim is a black person, an unarmed black person. It's never a clean trial. They always villainize and demonize the black person prior to the trial. Now, this wouldn't have been demonizing or villainizing Austin. This would just be showing character, showing that he was an aggressor. This is his character. He's an aggressive person, a person that starts things. He's a bully, some would say. That's what that shows. So to agree to that is almost like you're saying, now we just gotta, we're not even letting Karmelo testify, so we can't even take his word. It's just, this is the so-called evidence, and what do you think happened? And so that is why this seems to have been ineffective counsel, possibly It seemed, I mean, by him saying admitting it was a backdoor agreement, maybe it wasn't collusion for him to come out and admit this. I don't know about agreeing to it unless Karmelo had something that was so bad in his background that you just wanted to keep it out, which we hadn't heard any of that, because if he did, they would have put it all out. They told a bunch of lies on him. So this is, what's crazy. Let's continue.
Any character evidence, reputation evidence, or anything else extraneous. AKA, all those rumors you've heard about the Metcalf twins having a history of being aggressive, or that Karmelo was previously suspended for having a knife. All of those rumors would be considered character evidence or bad act evidence. But both sides agree that they would not bring that stuff up during the trial. And to be clear, I'm not saying that stuff is true, and I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying that they agreed they would not talk about it. Okay? According to the motion, the attorneys told the judge about this agreement that they had, but they told him in his chambers off the record. And they did it off the record because they didn't want the information to become public and for the media to begin reporting on the bad act evidence, which is kind of what happened anyway, because the rumor still started. And so, according to this motion, because of this agreement, Karmelo's team didn't question any of the students who took the stand about one of them having previously told police that Austin Metcalf was, quote, kind of like the aggressive guy on the team, nor did they ask another student about having told police, quote, Austin and Hunter, they're not going to let you disrespect them. And if Austin is about to get in a fight, you can tell. Or another student's statement, which said, quote, he could be a bit aggressive at times. In this motion, Karmelo's team is saying none of those things were brought up because of the agreement. However, once it came time for Karmelo to take the stand in his own defense, they say the prosecutors basically went back on their agreement. According to the motion, the prosecutors told them that their agreement never covered the defendant himself taking the stand. And since the defense mentioned in opening statements that Karmelo played chess, the prosecutors argued that they opened the door to be able to talk about Karmelo's character evidence. So they essentially said, if Karmelo testifies, all bets are off, and they will be bringing up any of his bad character evidence. So all of this happens during the trial. And so both sides go to the judge. And according to the motion, while the judge didn't agree that Karmelo playing chess opened the door, he did rule that he had no way to enforce this agreement because it happened off the record. And so he says if Karmelo does take the stand, that would essentially be opening the door and prosecutors would be allowed to question him about bad character evidence. And so with that, Karmelo then had to decide if he wanted to take the stand, knowing that this door had been opened, or if he would choose not to testify. The motion says Karmelo and his team were given 10 minutes to decide. And even though they asked the judge for more time, he denied them. And after 10 minutes, Karmelo decided not to testify. So
this is my thing, because now, so I don't know what kind of bad character evidence, because it would have come out. What I've been told or what I've heard, that the story about Karmelo being suspended for having a knife was a lie. I don't know what bad character evidence Karmelo could have possibly had that would supersede the testimony of these kids saying that the twins in Austin were aggressive, and if he's about to fight, you could tell. I don't know what would supersede that, and a lot of other character flaws that seem to be with these guys being troublemakers. I don't know what would have superseded that.
Argument here is Karmelo's team built their entire case strategy on this agreement with prosecutors, but then at the last minute, prosecutors go back on the agreement, which backed Karmelo into a wall and denied him the right and opportunity to fully defend himself in this case. And for that, they say he deserves a new trial. And to support this argument, they cite a case where prosecutors promised a defendant a lighter sentence in exchange for a guilty plea. But the prosecutor who made that promise ended up getting replaced, and the new prosecutor went back on that agreement and recommended a longer sentence for the defendant. After the defendant was sentenced, he appealed, and the court reversed the sentence and said that when prosecutors make promises or agreements with the defendant, they have to uphold those agreements. So that's what Karmelo's team is using to support their argument that he deserves a new trial because of this agreement situation. But again, there are some clear differences and some clear similarities between Karmelo's case and that case. So tell me what you think about this argument. And then reason number 3 and 4 as to why they say Karmelo deserves a new trial are much shorter than the first two. Argument number 3 is Karmelo's team says the jury instructions given by the judge were legally incorrect. And then argument number 4 is basically when you put reasons 1 through 3 all together, it shows that Karmelo didn't have a fair trial and should be given a new one. So those are the arguments from Karmelo's side. The state will obviously respond, but let me know what you think about what they're saying. And if all you're going to do is call me racial slurs, just block yourself now, okay?
So that was a good video. She broke down some stuff, but it is another video I want to take a look at. And that page is, I'm not a lawyer, but she did a good job with that. Now, I want to take a look at the young lady, Neek at Night. She covered the trial. She was an in-court reporter. for the trial, and she did some good work, but she got into some other things that were in the affidavit that I wanted to go over real quick. Now let's take a listen.
So it says, where we at? These witnesses, see, the defense also intended to cross-examine these witnesses about various statements they had made to the police on April 2nd regarding Austin Hunt being easily triggered, having a loud mouth, being passionate, not allowing themselves to be disrespected. Some specific examples include Austin's a really big guy, and he's the aggressive guy on the team. Austin got the same way that he got during the altercation is the same way he got with some of us. And the mellow kid.
So the way he got in this altercation is the same way he got with some of them. So they knew what time it was. So Austin is being described as an aggressive guy. He's a fighter. He likes to fight.
It's something or whatever, and then Austin got triggered. Austin and Hunter, they're not going to let you disrespect them. And Austin, he's like a big guy, so nobody really wants to fight him. And Austin's really a passionate guy. And Jose told police about Austin's history of fighting and almost getting kicked off the football team for fighting. Another statement, I've known Austin for a while, and if Austin is about to get into a fight, you can tell. Another statement, Austin can be a bit aggressive at times, and he has a bolder mouth sometimes. If the prosecution did not call any of these witnesses, the defense was ready to call them during the defense case in chief and question them as hostile witnesses. Furthermore, the defense intended to call witnesses familiar with Austin and Hunter Metcalf's reputation for violence and bullying. The defense intended to call witnesses who themselves were thumbs of the Metcalf twins. Violence and bullying. The defense intended.
So they had people who had been bullied by the twins that they did not allow to testify. Why would they allow something like this? If you know this is most likely what you need to do to win the trial, to win the case, why would you not let these guys testify? This is an issue.
Intended to question Memorial High School teachers about the Metcalf twins' disciplinary history contained in their school records, which corroborated their character for violence and bullying. And
they had teachers that they could have questioned about their history of being violent and bullies, and they didn't do it. How can you expect to win a trial if you don't get people to prove the character of the person that got killed? As a kid, it tugs at the heartstring. They allowed the parents to be in the courtroom crying, and it's just like kangaroo court. How can you not call these people to testify? This is an issue.
defense intended to elicit testimony about the Metcalf twins' arrest for racist graffiti in good faith reliance upon the agreement. The defense did none of this. The defense even limited its questioning of witnesses about statements they had made about the Metcalf twins being triggered, having a loud mouth, being passionate, etc. That had been deemed to be allowed under the agreement in an abundance of caution to avoid opening the door. Furthermore, related expert would open the door to character, reputation, and extraneous evidence pertaining to Karmelo. The defense chose not to designate any experts and ultimately chose not to call as a witness a neuropsychologist to discuss how Mr. Anthony's epilepsy impacted his perception of threat and response, as that is relevant to self-defense, and a forensic.
How can you expect to win a trial? You have a kid that has epilepsy. You don't call an expert witness to testify as to what someone who has epilepsy feels in the moment of stress. The stress of moments are what causes and triggers seizures. How could you not do that? How could you expect to win? How could he have expected to go in and be effective? Because there were things that you could have done, even just not even knowing all the details, just hearing people say that these guys were bullies, hearing the mom speaking about the kids being bullies, hearing the dad, the way he speaks, the racist rhetoric that he spewed before and after the trial. How would the kid have epilepsy? Just these things that would have been able to show that you were trying to win this case, at least getting him a manslaughter, or the jury being empathetic to say, okay, well, he was under a high stress situation. We'll give the crime of passion or the moment of passion thing where, or in the manslaughter where it's 2 to 10 years, we give him 2 years, or even 10 years, and he had to do at least 5. Why not bring this out? Why how could you expect with this case and all of this evidence, expect not to use any of it, not to call certain witnesses who would corroborate that these guys were bullies? How could you expect to win this trial? And I want to say, I'm trying not to say that it was collusion, but for him to, after the trial, to write this affidavit and kind of tell everything makes me feel like, well, maybe he tried to do a handshake agreement and then they went back on the agreement afterwards or whatever. It's just because I don't think they attack Karmelo's character, but when you don't have to attack the person's character that admitted to doing said crime or said alleged crime. He did the act, so you don't have to attack his character. You just have to attack what happened in the moment. You don't have to prove him to be this terrible person, but you do, if you're claiming self-defense, have to prove a character of the people that he's being accused of doing harm to. You just have to. And I'm just baffled as to how did this happen? Like, why would they not call these witnesses? It's crazy to me. Let's go.
Psychologists to discuss both brain development of a 17-year-old as well as the fight or flight response as it applied to Mr. Anthony's actions. Y'all want to tell me that they didn't railroad this boy? Y'all want to claim that he got a fair trial? If you see all of this evidence and you think that he got a fair trial, you're full of shit. You're full of shit. You're full of shit. There's no way that you can see this information and not see how they totally screwed Karmelo. Michi, what's your thoughts?
Hey, good to speak to you, Nick.
Hey.
I joined a bit late.
Okay. So, I mean, and it's amazing that these types of things still go on in the court system. Just to think that this type of stuff goes on, that they're doing backdoor deals, handshake agreements behind the scenes with somebody's life on the line and not giving them effective counsel. It's crazy to me just to hear that. And I think he'll get a new trial. I think with this information coming out, it's kind of like, how could you not grant the appeal? It was a kangaroo court, and his constitutional rights were violated. He didn't have a fair trial, and just for for his attorney to agree to not question people that would help his particular argument is baffling to me. But we're gonna wish for the best for him, and I do think the appeal should go through. He should get a new trial. Hopefully, I think I saw that they did a motion to I can't remember exactly what it was, but he definitely needs to get a new trial after this, because this is ridiculous. It's almost unheard of, what it seems like to me, for this type of thing to happen. So let me know what you feel in the comment section below. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. Do you think he deserves a new trial? His constitutional rights were violated? Let me know down in the comment section. Like, hype, subscribe, follow us on all social media networks. Real ones know. We out.
up, now we way up. Count it up to the day up. Real ones never change up. We just stack it, get our weight up. Yeah, yeah, yeah.